So today we're working on a 2002 Porsche 911 996 Carrera. It will not start, it will not crank. So he had it towed over here. We're going to diagnose it and see what's going on with it. The battery's disconnected, so we're going to go ahead and pop the frunk, connect the battery, and tighten down the battery terminal. Then we're going to jump in and see if we have electrical power, and then we'll try to crank it up and see what happens. Once I open the door, I see we have electrical power on the dashboard. I have the key in hand. I'm going to go ahead and stick the key in. See, we have 103,000 miles. Car's in really nice shape. I'm going to stick the key in. The ignition responds. I try to hit crank to start, and it won't do anything. I don't even hear a click at this point. I don't hear a click from the starter or anything. I'm going to try it a few more times. Won't do anything. No clicks. I don't hear the fuel pump activate. I even tried it in neutral to see if it was the neutral safety switch. Tried it again in park. So where I'm going to start with this diagnosis is I'm going to see if the starter is receiving power when I try to crank the key. And that'll give us a good starting point. I'm going to have somebody jump in the car and try to crank it while I see if it's receiving power on the small wire of the starter. So here on my Pro Demand, I'm going to come down and see where the location of the starter is and everything. For those of you that might not know, it's kind of behind the throttle body on top of the motor. So as you can see here, you would remove the air box. Then you kind of look under the intake manifold ducts between that and the block, and you should see the starter back there. I'm going to go ahead and pop the hood, and then I'm going to go ahead and remove the air box and move some hoses and stuff out of the way so I can get to it, and then we'll test that out. This is kind of a sped up process of me removing the air box. There's a couple of sensors, a couple of connectors. Disconnect those, and it's pretty easy otherwise. And you can kind of swing stuff out of the way so that way you can get access to it. With my tester on the bolt, I have my dad trying to crank the car, and there's no signal going to the starter. So we have a bigger problem here than a starter issue. The ignition is not sending signal to the starter to start up the car. So we have some other issue here. I'm actually gonna open up the back over here behind the rear seats. I'm gonna remove this panel here so I can have access to the relays, and then we're gonna see if the relay is receiving power to see if we have any other issue. Might just be a bad relay. So this car has the Bose system. We're gonna remove these little trim pieces right here. Behind these little trim pieces, you're gonna see some little Torx bolts down there. We're gonna remove those. Don't force on it because you're gonna break something. So make sure you remove those pieces. Then you kind of pull these little carpet pieces out, and you can kind of pull towards you, towards the front of the car, and it kind of just pops out there. And underneath that, there's like a carpet. Make sure you remove this connector too. And then there's this carpet piece that just kind of pulls up real easy. So underneath this carpet, you're gonna have these two metal plates, and they're fastened down with these 10mm nuts. Loosen those and take those off. And on the right side, we're gonna find all the relays right here. And I was able to find a diagram, and it's gonna be the one, this diagram is gonna be bottom left, right there, start block. I switched some relays around just to make sure that the relays weren't bad, and it was doing the same thing. They're receiving power like they're supposed to. So at this point, I figured there's something a little more serious going on. I grabbed my Autel computer, and I plugged up to see if I had any codes. And once I plugged up, I realized that it's not communicating with any of the modules. Not the DME, not the Tiptronic computer, not the BCM or ABS modules. None of the modules would communicate with this one or with my handheld computer. So I figured there's something a little more serious happening here. We either have an electronic issue, like a computer issue or wiring issue. I kind of inspected the harness to make sure there's no issues. And then I double checked and checked all the fuses, make sure we don't have anything blown or any major electrical issues going on. So once I confirmed that all the fuses were good, at this point I moved on to the DME, the computer, which is on the left side, right next to the box of relays. You see the 4 connectors there. On my Pro Demand, I went down to the DME module pin out. I wanted to confirm that the DME module is receiving power and ground and everything that it's supposed to. Because if that's the case, I should be able to communicate with it. Let's have a separate wired, of course. But I'm going to start from here and confirm that it's receiving all the powers and grounds. I ended up scrolling down, and here you can see, you can actually pause if you need to, but you can see that there's 9 plug connector on one side that has multiple powers and grounds. That's like the main connector for these things, for where the computer's receiving power and ground. These other connectors have the wires for all these other things for the engine. I'm not worried about that right now. I'm worried about the main things. So here I end up actually pulling up the wiring diagram and looking at specifics of where those 9 wires actually go to. They're the first 9 wires right there on the left. You can actually pause and look at that if you need to. As you can see, there's 3 brown ground wires, a couple of positives. I double checked and confirmed, and all that is working like it's supposed to. So I ended up pulling the DME out. I'm suspecting we have an issue with the DME because it has everything and it won't communicate. Flip it over and I realized that somebody's replaced it or messed with it before. Maybe aftermarket, maybe been tuned before. So out of curiosity, I decided to open it. And once I unscrew it and I open it, I realized there's like a really nasty stench, and there's like a big stain, almost like fire damage. And I look and it's burnt up. It's like melted. So it looks like we have a DME issue. We're going to go ahead and order a DME. Stay tuned, because next week we'll go ahead and put it in and see if it starts up. What do y'all think? Do you think we took care of the issue? Do you think this is a correct diagnosis? Well, we'll find out next week when we put it in.